Now, welcome to our Fermentation Fest speaker series. Our current speaker is Kirsten Shockey. Kirsten is the co-author of the best-selling books Fermented Vegetables, Fiery Ferments, and newly released Miso, Tempeh, Natto, and Other Tasty Ferments. She got her start in fermenting foods 20 years ago on a 40-acre hillside smallholding, which grew into an organic food company. When she realized her passion was for the process, she chose to focus on teaching fermentation arts to others. She teaches worldwide and hosts workshops on her homestead in Southern Oregon. You can find her on Instagram at ferment.works or www.ferment.works. Kirsten will be taking us through an info-packed presentation on cultivating koji, using it for countless applications in your own kitchen, including preparing homemade miso. After today's presentation, you will never look at mold the same way again. And she'll be signing books right after this. And I've known her for a while, and I think she's amazing. And there's some words that come to me when I think of her, which are ease, grace, humor, and mastery. So with that, bring you.
Hi. I will just talk like this, but if you can't hear me in the back, then I'm mic'd up in case you need more volume. It seems like a small space to have the insulting sound of a mic or a PA system. All right, so how many here have worked with fungal ferments or koji? Awesome. How many have not any clue what that's all about? Cool. Well, welcome. Yeah, so I won't talk a whole lot about who I am because Alex already did, and we don't have a lot of time, and I want to get right into the magic of koji. So koji is kind of what all the cool kids are talking about these days. If you're on Instagram or anywhere else, you're going to see everybody's talking about what is koji. So koji is a mold. It's a filamentous mold that has been part of the human kind of a cooperation with humans for about 7,000 or 8,000 years. And its magic is that it is about the enzymes. It's about harvesting the enzymes to do the breaking down for us. So things that have large particles, components don't taste that great, but once you start breaking them down, they do. So what koji does is it facilitates this breaking down. So let's talk about what enzymes are. So enzymes, I like to think of them as little snippers, little scissors that come in there and they break down those large molecules. They take the molecules and they break them apart. So you've got starches become sugars, fats become fatty acids, and proteins become aminos. So that's where you're going to start getting your flavor and all of that into these ferments. So I will have these guys bring out the first sample, which is we're just going to taste some koji that was made by Ferments in Maine, and you guys should visit their little booth. It's beautiful. So this is koji. It's grown on, in this case, rice, and you'll taste a sweetness. This one is a koji that has been grown for making miso. So the enzymes that it has more of are protease enzymes to break down that protein. And you'll also taste maybe a smokiness or a little bit of a cedar. It's because they grow their koji in the traditional cedar trays. What do you guys think? Isn't that tasty? So, I mean, koji isn't usually eaten alone, but it is fun to taste it alone. And when we grow at home, you know, sometimes maybe super floral, super mushroomy. And then it's about releasing those sugars. So just quick science lesson. Like I said, it's a fungus, mycelium. It's got little roots. They're digging down. When you inoculate your koji, what's happening is the spores are getting in there. The first thing they're doing is laying down a set of enzymes and getting in there just to start feeding themselves. They're all about feeding themselves. And so if there's a little starch and they can get a foothold, that's what they're gonna do. So this, you guys can read this. I don't need to really go through it, but koji is Aspergillus oryzae, and in traditional Japanese culture and throughout the ages, it's been grown mostly on rice. It's been grown on barley, depending on the region. It also millet, some on sweet potatoes, and on the soybeans themselves. And again, so there's all these different spores. The ones that you guys tasted, like I said, are more for miso, for the protease enzyme. The other ones are maybe going to be more amylase, and that is depending on what you want to make with it. I don't usually do slideshows. Stuff for you guys. So anyway, I kind of talked about this coevolution came together. Now, why did they start wanting to break down the grains? Was flavor, but it was also sake. Sake is a big use for koji. And what I think is really important to understand about koji, and I think those slides are coming, but, is that it's the primary fermentation. What koji does is it gets things ready for fermentation. Koji isn't a ferment itself. It is kind of a first step for the process of fermenting a lot of different things. Because the lactobacillus, the yeast, and all of these other ferments, the microbes that want to move in, they can't deal with those bigger molecules of starch. They can't get in there and break it down. Once the koji has made the sugar, then the lactobacillus and the yeast have something to do. So like for sake, for example, in the West, for alcohol ferments, we took our grains, our barley, or wheat, whatever, and malted it for beers and for alcohol, because we need to get to that sugar that's locked up in the starch. And so in Asia, they discovered koji does that. It unlocks those starches for sake. So the secondary fermentation, and these are traditional uses, real simple, might be Shio koji or Amazake. And that is when you're going to take the koji that you've grown, and we'll talk about that in just a second, how that happens, and you're going to start using those enzymes. So Shio koji, have you guys heard of Shio koji before? Well, you're going to taste it. And I am happy to take questions while I'm talking, so feel free to raise your hand. So Shio koji, I love Shio koji. Discovering Shio koji and cooking to me was mind-blowing, because it's like using a soy sauce in that, that looks like the Amazake. Oh wait, that's true. I did say that we were going to do sweet before salty, so you guys can taste the sweet. So let's talk about Amazake and Shio koji, because they're kind of similar. One's sweet and one's not. Okay, so Amazake and Shio koji are both sort of that first thing that you can do with koji if you get a hold of some or if you make some yourself. Amazake is sort of what cider is to hard cider, what apple juice is to hard cider. It's sake's virgin little sister. So this is what can become sake if it's fermented then with yeast and the alcohol is allowed to ferment. If it becomes sake, then it can have another step of fermentation and become vinegar, but it all starts with the koji. But amazake is also wonderful to drink and enjoy just as it is. And I haven't actually tasted this one, but usually it's super sweet. Is it super sweet? Sweet, yeah. Very sweet, not very sweet? I'm always surprised at how sweet amazake is because there's no sugar added, and it's yeah, it's pretty sweet. But anyway, so that's amazake. I use amazake for actually fermenting things. You can put vegetables in the amazake for either hours or days, and you're going to start getting those enzymes working in on that vegetable, whether it's a piece of cucumber or a carrot. Yes?
Is whether it winds up sour or sweet, is that dependent on the type of koji used, or time, or salinity, or a combination of those things?
Okay, so amazake is pretty straightforward in that you've got koji,
Yep.
and then you're adding it to something. In this case, they've added it to rice. I don't know if it's brown rice or white rice. And then you're bringing it up to temperature of around like 130 degrees. 138 is about the top, but you're going to get a really good enzyme action happening there. That's going to happen in like 6 hours at that temperature.
Okay.
When you get sour flavors involved, what's happening is you're getting some lactobacillus that's moved in. And so that's, and that usually happens when it's cooler temperatures. So if you want a sour koji like this, then you're going to put that koji and that rice together, and you're going to leave it on your counter because you're not just after the enzymes, you're after the lactobacillus. And the lactobacillus doesn't want that warm temperature. It's happier under 100 degrees.
But the koji's still happy at those lower temperatures, or functional?
Still functional. It's all about the enzymes. It's not the koji or the mold. Once you've grown your koji, you're harvesting the enzymes.
Okay.
They denature somewhere around 140. So everything under that is open for the enzyme use. Although the enzymes work a little hotter than the lactobacillus. So, yeah.
I have koji in my refrigerator, and it's been there for years. How long does it last?
Frozen, it lasts a lot longer. In your refrigerator, it may not, but it may do something. So you could take it out and see what happens. We'll talk a little bit more about making in just a minute. Okay. Any questions on amazake?
Is it alcohol? So it's not alcoholic at all?
It's not alcoholic at all at this point. So you can take this now and you can add yeast, and it will become like, this is nice and cloudy, it'll become like a farmhouse sake, like a cloudy, nice sake. Yes?
So that was actually related to my question. What is amazake most commonly used for? Is it most commonly used to make sake, or are there other purposes?
So the question, what's it most commonly used for? It's used as is, as a warm drink. A lot of times traditionally as a warm drink even. I like to use it in the place of, milky things if I'm making a smoothie, because it's fun and it adds a lot of flavor. And then it usually goes on to become sake. And then Shio Koji is a similar idea. Yeah, let's do it. And this is, like I said, this is like, to me, it's like soy sauce in that you can marinate with it, you can pickle with it, you can put it in just about anything. And I find it to be like a secret sauce. Now, this is really super salty, so you might not want to go for the spoonful right away. It works like soy sauce, except as you'll taste, it doesn't have that kind of amino flavor that the protein of the soybeans gives to it. So you can get sort of that same pow, that same thing that soy sauce does to your food without getting that soy flavor, and so it doesn't end up tasting Asian, which can happen with soy sauce. Which isn't a bad thing, it's just depending on what you want to do with it. So I really like cooking with this. It is a super salty ingredient. However, when you're using it, if you're wanting to cook with a little less salt but still get that flavor, then this is a great thing to cook with because you're actually still using less salt than if you put salt in by itself.
Do you use this to make ramen from scratch? That's what I mean. Certainly.
Yeah, you certainly could.
Shio ramen.
Yeah, I mean you can do anything with this. So with koji, shio koji, or sour amazake, or even a sour amazake, you can also pickle with this. Any of these, because you're pickling then with the enzymes. You're putting it in a media or in a container with a little bit of this. I also use shio koji with tempeh, and so a little bit of tempeh, a little bit of shio koji, and then you put the tempeh in with that, and you can then use whatever spices. Like I'll do a breakfast sausage with sage, maple syrup, shio koji. And what that shio koji does is it really gets into the tempeh, and you start getting those other flavors to really help bring them in and move it in there. Or like a chorizo, again, you can really play with these to bring those flavors into something like tempeh. Let's see. Okay. Taste. That's what you guys have been doing. This is carrots that are fermenting in with amazake and with shio koji.
Do you have to have a salt brine, or do you just use this?
You just use this. Yeah. And if you're using the shio, you're also going to get that saltiness. So we'll bring out the last one. So the last thing you're going to taste is a pickled cucumber. These cucumbers came from my garden, Southern Oregon. They made it. They didn't even get soft. And I put them in a bread aminos. So we're going to talk a little bit more about all the things that you can grow koji on besides rice. In this case, I think these aminos were grown on bread 3 years ago, and so this is still an amino and it was stale bread, so it's a good way to zero waste some old bread. So those have been sitting in there for since 9 o'clock. So that's just a really quick pickle. Like I said, you can do a few days, you can do a few hours, just to kind of add a little something.
We use the amazake or one of these like a brand pickle.
Oh, you're thinking of a nuka pot. Yeah, that's different.
Oh, you wouldn't use something to not be like brand.
Not with the koji. You had a question?
Yeah, in the previous slide there was you were fermenting carrots in it would look like a plastic bag. Is that something you feel comfortable doing as opposed to glass?
In that case, I was traveling with it in the airplane, so yeah, it was the best way to do it. Plus with the plastic bag, you can use just a very little bit, so it's vacuum sealed. I try to stay away from plastic as much as possible, but when I'm taking it across country and I want it to marinate, it's definitely the way to go. So what do you guys think?
Delicious. Delicious. Really good.
That was your favorite?
When the koji is grown on bread and then used, would that be a problem for somebody that's celiac?
Probably. I mean, it is breaking down the proteins, but I think with celiac, you're getting a little. So fermentation and gluten are pretty interesting. A lot of people that are not celiac but gluten intolerant can have sourdoughs, because fully true sourdoughs, because that microbial community gets in there and changes it up. Yeah, I don't know how much the koji would break it apart, but it would be interesting to know for sure. So once you have koji, you've got a wide open possibility of things that you can ferment with it. Again, we're going to talk about traditional examples. You've got miso, and increasingly more and more folks are making, we can call them misos, we can call them amino pastes, we can call them tasty pastes, but they're taking the method, the idea, they're harvesting those enzymes, this ancient thing, and then they're combining it with, wow, let's see what koji enzymes do to cookie dough, or ricotta cheese, or day-old bread, and they're making these amazing pastes. So that's kind of what's going on out there. Yeah.
So for miso, would you only call it a miso if it's soybeans, or as long as it's any bean?
You know, I think that terminology is still working on defining itself, like how it's going to be called. But misos traditionally are soybeans or chickpeas or many different beans. But the ones you'll see the most are soy, for sure. So another traditional use of koji is going to get you, with the soybean, is going to get you shoyu sauces or tamari. Just real quickly, the difference, a shoyu is a soy sauce that has been made where the koji's been grown on the soybeans, often on wheat as well, and then put in a brine and fermented for a really long time, and then those are strained out, and you're going to get a shoyu sauce. Traditionally, tamari is that deliciousness that comes on top of the miso. It's a miso tamari, and I don't know if Goen is sampling that out there, but they do have a traditional tamari, and that's why you read wheat-free tamari, because traditionally it really comes off of the miso making process, which, as you remember, is, well, you don't remember because I didn't tell you, is beans and koji. This is something I've been playing with, koji on corn masa and chocolate nibs for a mole tasty paste. So I've been doing a lot of that. I'm going to be in Oaxaca with Alex. And so I'm really trying to play around with, so the lighting isn't great, but the forward one is on chocolate nibs, and the other, the koji, is grown on masa.
I know you said it's new. Is that recipe in the book? Or no?
That particular recipe is not in the book, but what is in the book is traditional recipes, a few recipes that are not, but mostly it's how to do this and then how to combine it. So, sake we talked about. This is really cool. Jeremy Umansky is in Cleveland, and he's playing around with making charcuterie with vegetables. So what you're looking at there is beet with koji growing on it, a parsnip, and then a salami, and that is maitake mushrooms. He's grown the koji on the maitake. When it started to get going, he rolls it up, and then that knits it all together. Also, to dry age, growing it straight on meat and salami and different things.
Is it fair to say that once you start playing with koji, you start trying to use it on everything and everything is like, oh, I could koji that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes a verb. Yeah, because you're like, wow, what can happen here? And so yeah, this is, again, Jeremy was the one that really started doing this. What I've got going on here is, these are 3 steaks. The one is just plain. The middle one has been soaking in Amazake for, I don't remember how many hours. And then, so just harvesting those koji enzymes that way. And you can do that, like you can take koji powder and grind it up and soak meat in it just for a few hours to really get those enzymes in there. And then that final one is the koji grown directly on the meat itself. And those enzymes are getting in there and you're getting these really great dry aged flavors. It feels wrong to do this. So you're taking, we're going to talk a moment about how we grow it, but you're taking a piece of meat, you're putting it in an incubator at about 88 degrees in a nice humid environment for days. Like everything your mother has told you not to do with meat, you're doing it, and you're getting these floral, mushroomy smells. You're not getting off smells. If you're getting off smells, that's a problem. But yeah, and you keep thinking, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then you cut into it and it's beautiful. So it's really interesting to play around with that. So it's hard to see this photo, especially the other one, but like I just referred to, how do you grow koji? It's actually pretty easy, but what makes koji and tempeh harder, they're both fungal ferments, is unlike kimchi or something, you can't just stick it on your counter. You need these really specific temperatures. So you're going to need some kind of incubation system. The one is a dry incubation system. I don't know that you can see down in there, but it's run with a thermostat that's hooked up to a light bulb, and that turns on and off as needed. The other system, which is kind of my favorite way to do it because you don't have as much trouble managing that humidity, is that's an old cooler with the tray growing, floating in it. That's water and a fish tank heater and a bubbler to keep that water moving and keep that temperature. So the fish tank heater is perfect because koji and fish seem to need a similar temperature. So because you don't want to cook your fish, turns off. The other reason I like using a water bath, again for koji and for tempeh both, is after that mold really gets in there and starts metabolizing, it's creating its own heat. So for the first 12, 18, 24 hours, you're really babying it. You have to keep it warm. As soon as it starts metabolizing, you run the risk of it overheating. And if it overheats, it can kill the koji and then invite other microbes and spoiling microbes in. So with the water, you've got, at first it's keeping it warm like a womb, but then as soon as it starts getting warm, that water's actually cooling it off and dissipating the heat that it's creating on itself. So both of those setups are kind of easy. Like I said, mine with the water there is just a cooler, water, the fish tank stuff. And then you've got just making it. So you're going to cook your rice or your substrate to an al dente. You don't want it too wet. And you disperse it in some flour. Gem Cultures has been carrying koji for a long time. There's a lot of other online sources. And the reason you're going to disperse it in flour, you're going to cook that flour up a little bit. And that's if you're going to put it on meat or carrot or whatever you want to put it on to sterilize it. Once the flour cools off, you're going to add your koji spores and then disperse that in. That does a couple things. It also gives that koji really easy starch to get going and get started because, like I said, it's going to get in there and it's feeding itself. You're going to keep it warm, like I said, that 80 to 95 degrees. That first 18 to 24 hours, especially is when you want to keep it warm, and then you'll start seeing it get fuzzy, which is pretty exciting. And then 40 to 50 hours, it's going to be done. So this is koji grown on some black soybeans. That's kind of perfect right there. This next slide shows that it's sporulating. So that little tinge of green on there is sporulation. This is going to be dochi, which needs to be sporulated, so I was doing that on purpose. But most things, you don't want to get it to that point. You want that sweetness early on.
The earlier picture is what it should look like.
Yeah. So, back to the question about how long do you have it. If it's fresh, you want to use it within the first few days. Especially if you're going for something sweet like amazake, you definitely want to, or sake, use it right away. If you're going to be using it for miso or something where you're headed more towards those amino and protein flavors, then it's okay to wait a little longer. You can dry it, freeze it. If that seems overwhelming, there are wonderful companies here and elsewhere that make koji for sale, and you can just start playing with it. Like you can get some koji and go home and make some Shio koji, or make amazake, or make miso, or make a tasty paste. So, just really quickly, amazake is 1 part koji, 1 part water. And like I said, you're going to keep it incubated in an oven or with the light on or something. Shio koji is the koji with sea salt and water. And this one you're going to leave at room temperature. You're not going to have to keep it so warm.
How long has the Shio koji already since you've made it, and now you have it, and you're not using part of it immediately?
Right.
You put it in the refrigerator and just...
There we go. Oops. Where are we going? We're just going on and on. Yes, you can keep it refrigerated or you can keep it out. Those bread aminos that you guys tasted has been out for 3 years. So it's pretty stable.
Refrigerator for like a week?
No, you can keep it for years. Years. Yeah, the fresh koji about a week.
Okay.
But the Shio or, yeah. So let's talk about a tasty paste or miso. So at its most basic, maybe 1 part koji, 1 part beans, maybe 4 to 5% salt, and then you want to seed miso. But you guys have all tasted white miso. You've probably all tasted a really dark hacho style soy miso and all these misos in between. How that works is it's all the relationship of the koji, the protein, and the salt content. So a white miso might ferment in 2 weeks because you're going to use a lot of koji, a very little bit of bean, and a smaller percentage of salt. Something like a red miso, you're going to use maybe like this, half koji, half bean, and higher salt than your white miso, but will take 2 weeks to a month. And then now you're talking about maybe 9 months to 18 months or 2 years. You're going to have this longer fermentation. You're going to have that higher salt, less koji, more protein for it to get through. So that's why it's going to take longer. And then you've got the other end. Some of these hacho misos are traditionally fermented for like 9 years. And they're really dark and delicious because they've had those enzymes working on them. They've got the sugars being processed or broken down too with that Maillard reaction. And so those ones have a lot more salt. And in the case of a hacho, there's actually no koji rice. It's just the bean itself, the koji's grown on the bean. And so that's kind of your extreme. So when you're playing around with what's your miso jam, what do you want to make, what's your tasty paste, that's the parameters of, do I want something done quickly, and do I want it sweet, and do I want it less salty? Then I'm going to use more koji, less salt, and then I have less time, right? Or do I want to really put something away and forget about it for 3 or 4 years? Those are going to be a higher salt. Now, what the salt does is it controls that fermentation. So the lower the salt, the more other things like yeasts and lactic acid are going to affect your fermented flavor. So some people have done their first miso and they're like, it was good, but wow, it was really sour. I'm not used to sour flavors in my miso. And that's going to be because maybe there was a lot of koji and not a lot of salt, and that lactobacillus is in there anyway, but it's working even more. And so that's where the salt is a player, is especially with the longer ferments. It's slowing down that fermentation and getting those enzymes to act and put it all together that way. I see a couple hands.
So I made some koji or some miso back in January. We did not put in seed miso, and it seemed slow to start, and I think that makes sense. I didn't realize you were supposed to put in seed miso. It'll still eventually get there.
Right.
It just will be a lot slower.
Totally,
Okay.
yeah. Seed miso is not a requirement, but if you've got a good miso, it's nice to do that because you're kind of infecting it, if you will.
It seemed like it was like
culturing it with the guys that you want.
Yeah, it
It's
was like a
you're
month
picking-
until it started really doing anything.
Right, yeah. Yes.
Is anyone deliberately infecting their misos and other koji ferments with lacto?
Deliberately?
Yeah.
Well, like a sour amazake, like you talked about, is kind of deliberately trying to go for those sour flavors.
But I mean, taking, if you have a lactobacillus culture, whether it's from a pickle or kombucha or a good belly shot or whatever, are there any people who are like spiking their ferments with those?
I have not heard of people doing that with the tasty pastes or misos so much. It's all in there anyway. The lactobacillus is part of it.
Okay.
So, all right. So again, ideas and uses, we kind of talked about that. Some other things, I really like growing koji on oat grouts and making a totally, it's not sugar-free, it's got oat sugar in it, but a granola with it. Polenta corn koji is fun. It's also fun to even put rice koji in your leftover polenta or your leftover whatever and have a porridge the next morning. Nut-based pickle things we talked about. Other fun things that people are doing, ice cream, and talked about all those good things. If you're still not ready to actually make it yourself, these guys have it, or other makers.
Yeah, can you start your koji, if you live in an environment that's always 80 to 90 degrees, could you just start it without the incubator?
Yeah, if it's always that temperature, you can see what happens, always. Yeah, you can certainly play around with it because you've got humidity. Well, that's the thing, like with tempeh in Indonesia, right? We have to work really hard to get our tempeh in these perfect little conditions, but in Indonesia, they traditionally didn't use a plastic bag. It's like in the banana leaf, and it did it because those were the conditions that were perfect for it.
Right, I live in the Philippines. It's always hot.
Okay, so same kind of thing. Any questions? And that was kind of like all over the place and quick, but 45 minutes isn't a whole lot. Yeah.
What about medicinal herbs? Have you ever fermented medicinal herbs? I know in Japan they're using koji to ferment Panax ginseng. It's working really good for cancer. So I wanna ferment other herbs.
Oh, yeah. You should
Have
play
you-
around with it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't go down the medicinal path a whole lot. Yeah, for me, it's like the flavor path. But yeah, I see where I'm getting in there.
Okay.
But I do like the idea of like, you know, food is medicine, these functional foods, kind of mixing that together.
Yeah, I heard it can multiply the medicinal effect of herbs, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I know with fermentation, lactic acid fermentation with herbs, it's pretty incredible, so.
How do you choose a koji culture? Obviously, I know you can go online, you can order things that are recommended for sake, miso, tempeh, et cetera, but if you're doing more non-conventional, you know, you're doing your cacao nib ferments and polenta ferments and whatever, how do you choose the appropriate koji that's gonna, I get that there's experimentation, but what's your mindset when you're trying to choose a koji for a specific function?
Well, for people that are just getting started, I go with a light koji just to kind of get in the game. But once you start thinking about how you're going to choose it for your function, think about what you're going to make, right? So if you're going to make something where you really know you want the sweet end of things, you're going to go to a koji that really gets the amylase going. So those lighter rice kojis. If you know you're going to be working with proteins and meats and garums and things like that, then you're going to want to choose one that is for protease, or you can get like a soybean koji, because that is going to be the more protein protease production.
And the places that are selling koji will give you that information as far as.
Well, if
like,
you're buying koji itself, that's if you're buying the spores.
Sorry, I meant the spores.
Yeah, if you're buying spores, then you can make those decisions. If you're buying koji itself, you're pretty much going to get rice koji.
Right.
Yeah.
How challenging is it to perpetuate, so to sporulate and kind of doing it yourself rather than necessarily kind of continuing to buy spores?
Well, the koji spores are a little harder to keep pure. So in Japan, they have, if you Google koji koji labs, they're like fully in their suits. One reason is because the spores are so light and you don't want to breathe them in. But then just on making it yourself, I found that I could get maybe 2 or 3 times through with like taking some rice that I let sporulate, then put that into a blender and grind it up and use that as the inoculant. But beyond that, you're just starting to dilute it too much. So I don't usually do much more than once.